right, so we are on to the last technical talk for today, as well as for the whole symposium before the final keynote, which also take place here. So I'm very honored to introduce Pardhu, who is an expert in data governance for the developing trustworthy AI systems. And he is both a open source thought leader, doer, as well as an entrepreneur creating this metaphor data platform that he will be sharing with us about today. So let's welcome Pardhu.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for having me here. And before I introduce my talk and data governance aspects and things, I want to just take a quick pulse check around how many of you have worked with any data governance platforms or familiar with it or anything related to data compliance, data warehouses. Not much, I see. Okay, a little bit, thank you. So I will just cover a little bit of like intro to like what that means before I talk about what's the most practical aspect around this, right? So why this is relevant, like especially for this kind of a conference. Like, as you must have heard, everywhere, data is everywhere, and data is the one, every single company is trying to be data driven and like make every business decision based on data rather than just the gut feels or domain knowledge alone. So, but is everyone being successful? What does it really need? What are the challenges they are seeing? And why data governance is important to win, especially in, I will take an example. This is not very specific to manufacturing industry, but we have a customer who is from a manufacturing industry and like how that becomes relevant in that domain. So going into that, let me, as introduced, in my past, before starting my company Metaphor to bring this solution to every company out there, I worked on metadata team at LinkedIn, and I've also built like multiple data platforms at Amazon and like within LinkedIn metric stores, etc. The theme is constant, right? Like, so everyone wants to democratize the data and like make lot more people inside the company use the data and like make the decisions. So how do you scale it? Both, it's not just a technology problem, it is an organization problem, it's a process problem, everything. So that's what solving that for LinkedIn inspired us to kind of like create this company and like bring it as a solution out for every company out there. So what is data governance, right? Like, so if you Google for it, you will see wide variety of explanations for it, and unfortunately or unfortunately, it's not a concise one-liner, two-liner. People have written like, including Wikipedia, has given like a verbose descriptions of what data governance is. But considering all of those, the simplest explanation I like to give is how do you, that is one necessary thing inside your data, when you are working with the data, to make sure the data what you are using inside your organization is accurate for making every business decision as well as compliant. You must have heard all the things around compliance there for a long time, but it's a lot more relevant right now, given the GDPR, CCPA, kind of a lot of new laws coming around. Even speaking with my friend like Ben, we're talking about like the new laws that are coming up around AI model compliance and like explainability, etc. as well. So it's not just about making the decisions. You need to make sure you do it the right way and you're ready to kind of like explain it to the people why you are making some decisions and like things like this. Everyone is kind of like familiar with it. So how do you, why people, process, and technologies are important, right? Like, so, and how does these three things come relevant for data governance? If you see data governance underneath, it actually splits like into multiple facets around the data, right? If you think about who owns this data, like, or who is responsible for this data, like as the data keeps moving across your systems, it starts from your people talked about sensors collecting the data or IoT devices collecting and storing the data into your particular system. It gets transformed, analysts or real-time systems, processing systems migrate into like process into multiple layers, and eventually there are AI models, features built out of that, multiple versions of it. They get deployed back into your actual production environments and things, so a lot of implications of it. Who owns at what stage and what aspects of the data? And who has access to this data? Like you must have all heard about stories around funny things like people use this data, and like when AI was initially like on its rise, people got crazy with like training the models with every single thing. The most fundamental examples people give is, if you know your human behavior, how you are purchasing on things, Amazon or any of these things can start like showing custom prices for you because you know what kind of compulsive buyer you are or not. So government has to step in and say that, hey, don't abuse the AI for these kind of benefits. So you need to make sure people don't have like wide variety of access within the organization as well. Of course, data has to be secure. If you think your entire organization business runs on data, it has to be very secure, and like any data leaks can like bring down your company itself. Like so just making sure from a governance perspective that is there. And quality, you only build the trust in your business decisions on this data only if you know that the quality of the data what you are using is also very high. There are a wide variety of facets of quality itself. You need to make sure it is fresh. You are making fresh, and it's also like doesn't have any errors, error prone, like, and quality is checked, everything else as well. The last but not least is the aspects around knowledge. This being knowledge first conference, I believe like this is one of the most underrated aspect of data governance. Everyone thinks of data governance as a technology problem, but there is so much of like knowledge around the domain or the context of like why data is being used for what, for a particular business decision. All this kind of knowledge also needs to be captured and like presented to make any decision around your data governance. So I will not go very deep into any of these things much further, but I want to just give you a high level of like what kind of data governance solutions existed and why they failed, and like how people have tried to address that. The most common thing which existed for like last 2 decades, this is a data governance problem. Even before the cloud and everything, data governance term existed, and how people have solved this is the manual data governance approach. It's very top down. Someone inside your CISO, like organization Chief Information Security Office, or there is a data governance officer sitting in your organization, sitting separately, and makes the decision what's looking at the laws and organizational interest and things, makes up some laws of how the data governance has to be like implemented inside the company. And it's very restrictive. A funny example, someone said like while AI models and things like bring so much of advancement to production decisions and things, an average model with all these laws considered, the minimum time it takes to kind of like someone to kind of get access to the data and like start developing a recent model within such a restricted environments is 6 months. And it can go, depends upon the nature of the model, it can go like all the way to like production, like more than a year. So the data which you train and like build your model might actually become irrelevant by the time you take it into production, which is a bigger challenge for these kind of governance policies. And it is very centralized. Fewer set of folks in the organization have control over it, like, and have decisions over it. Like for example, your data warehouses or like things are controlled by a fewer set of folks, what kind of data you create, what kind of models you create, and things, research and productions are like very different environments as well. And it is also operated by data steward committees. And have you heard about this term, data stewards, which are, I see some nods, they pick different types of like business experts or technical experts or compliance experts across the company. And like these people are designated the role stewardship. And they kind of like participate in decision making, and everyone else is kind of like, has to depend upon these data stewards to kind of like make them understand what data governance is within the organization. And the most important and the biggest pain point around this kind of model, it's very much disconnected from your actual data systems itself. So what does this mean? These days, everyone is talking about data democratization, access to data, like create your own data, create your own analysis and like decision making, everything using the data. But what happens inside the actual data practitioners versus what the data governance system is thinking about is very much disconnected. It is a lot more manual process to kind of sync these two systems bidirectionally, and it is done usually through audits or compliance reviews once in 6 months or once in a quarterly before they go and present back the compliance reports to the government or any of the organizations, SOC 2 reports, etc. So the other aspect, like when the technology around even AI, using AI for this data governance itself came into picture, companies like LinkedIn did some of those aspects. Facebook is very popular for this as well. Complete AI-based detection and enforcement. What this means, there is still someone who sets the governance laws, data governance laws within the company, but it is translated into AI models. Every single data is identified, what kind of nature of the data, how does it affect the policy, and what is implemented. So any decision around transferring the data, creating the data, or deleting the data is done entirely through AI detection models. While on theory it works, sounds very great, and let's see what are the challenges, what it has, right? There is absolutely no human in the loop to operationalize it. So you expect everything is run through the AI models, like any decision making, like humans are only at the top of the funnel. It's not compatible with your entire data stack. It requires every data system, every data platform to be compatible with this model of like AI-driven management, which means modernization of your entire data stack, or building like a lot of additional layers of like management around your legacy systems to make it like compatible with this AI-driven data management. And the biggest challenge is it doesn't have any domain context, be it business domain or a particular like HR domain or any of these like financial domain aspects around why certain decisions are made with respect to the data, especially in industries which are like a lot more manufacturing focused and stuff. It has to be, people are talking about a lot of technical expertise coming from the domain expertise, subject matter experts and stuff, which is not embedded back into this governance. So we have seen both spectrums of people trying to adopt like these traditional data governances as well as fully automated AI data governances, and it is very challenging for them to kind of practically apply it and be productive with their systems. So when we looked at it and said like, hey, what is the right balance? How can metadata system help with data governance? How can it make it more agile, to make it more practical? So we took all the technical metadata coming from your systems, including how the data is moving across your systems, ETL processes, data quality, and all the aspects what I talked about, where it is being used, etc. We combined that with the social and business context. What does business and social context mean, right? Like not just the data, where is it being used, why is it being used, and who is using it, and what are the use cases not supposed to be used, etc. Every other aspect of it, we combine this together to build trust, especially in your data. Along with that, in the whole process, we build insights into what's happening with your data across your organization, insights into like collaboration aspects, like for example, you're trying to bring together your producers and like consumers across your stack, both from the business side to originators like developers, data scientists, data engineers, everyone together to kind of collaborate on the data. And you're building like a lot of insights around like what are your hotspots, what is the return of investment on your data models, what is the return of investment on your processes, etc. around the data. So how do we do that? So if you look at any traditional data catalogs, like you understand what tables exist in what data warehouses or what models are deployed and everything. These are primary assets of your data catalog. But we also look at like metrics and what business data dictionaries, what does this each column mean? What is a business glossary connected to this, etc. All of these aspects. But along with that, we tap into all your day-to-day conversations around data. Like, for example, if you are using Slack or Teams for your conversations with your data team or your business analyst or with your MLOps person, we also like bring in that context of those conversations back into the data. We capture that everything along with it. And if you're making exceptions to the data, for example, you're deprecating something and moving towards a new model, deprecating a column and like trying to use something else for this new use case, we capture all those decision making along with not just the end product of like what the model is, but like why, like the process around why and things. And most importantly, we look at it from a use case perspective. It's not just like what the data table is or what the model is, but like what is it being used for? What use cases is it serving on the business? We try to capture all of it together. So together, along with that, Metaphor gives you like that 360-degree view around like the data governance from an entire end-to-end stack perspective, including who is involved, what data assets are involved, and why it is involved. Like, for example, what business is it serving, etc. I want to talk to you about one specific use case. How many of you are familiar with Sub-Zero? Yep. So they are, as you see, raise of hands, like Sub-Zero is an appliance manufacturer out of Wisconsin. And just to give their current state of things, like they are completely on their cloud journey. They have adopted a modern data stack, which usually is like Databricks or Snowflakes and like Power BIs and this set of the worlds for their data analytics and reporting, and they're using for ML development model as well. So they have a lot of IoT devices across all their appliances, and they receive a lot of data into their data system. And they're trying to build this, bridge the gap between what's happening on the manufacturing side of the world for their appliances versus what's happening on the data side of the world, making the decisions around like the business for using the same data. The challenges are like, yes, they need to make sure all the data what they're getting is reliable and like can be used in your analytics reports and stuff. They also need to educate both sides of the world, like bringing the domain knowledge from the manufacturing side into the data world, and as well as the impact of this data back into the manufacturing world as well. As you can expect, there are multiple stakeholders as you are using the same data across and seamlessly. So they need to educate all those people as well. They adopted a data catalog called Colibra. Have you heard about Colibra? They're a popular, like just a representation of like what a traditional data catalog or a data compliance platform represents. And they've been using it for a long time. And it's extremely expensive, north of like, usually the typical costs are in multiples of hundreds of thousands or up to more than $1 million as well. Very low value or low outcome for a data governance platform to run. And it's very high maintenance. So this is a traditional example of like a top-down data governance approach, which is impactful only within a small data team or a governance team, but no one else inside the company can understand the value of it. So Metaphor, they brought in Metaphor as an agile data governance platform into the company. We are a modern data catalog, introduced as a modern data catalog into the company. We integrated in less than a month. And we surpassed the entire usage of like whatever they got of the previous platform in 2 years within the 4 months of introduction. So while I talked about various use cases and like the approaches around like bringing in the business metadata and stuff, I want to give you an example while ending this talk. I will give a specific example of like what does that mean, bringing the business metadata and the technical data together, right? Typical example is that like they have deployed wide variety of tables in their data warehouse, which is Snowflake, to kind of like make eventually build reports and models into their production systems. And while these are distributed across different groups of people, and only when connecting all of these things together and understanding the business impact of each of these models and reports, they understood which of these are the most popular ones, which are the most high impactful ones, and which of them do not actually come out of like production data. Some of the tables are still on the development side, development mode, and like running that without proper certifications, which is a challenge for data governance, is to make sure that your data is actually trustable. And like you're actually building end products based on like trustable data and like reliable data rather than development data. So these kind of insights is extremely hard to identify without like a system like Metaphor or Catalog, which can bring all the information together and give you the insights with very less effort. So this is one of the many use cases which we worked with them and like enabling agile data governance across the companies. Yep, that ends my talk. Just to reiterate, I wanted to introduce like what is agile data governance to enable data data democratization across these companies while you are developing like a lot of these data-driven decisions. Yeah. Any questions?
Fantastic. Let's start the Q&A.
So I know like different areas of the world have different data governance laws. How do you handle that from like a company's side, like between America versus like EU laws, things like that?
Good question. So there is definitely an aspect of where you are based on like GDPR versus the CCPA where you're operating and things. So it kind of like spreads across your those laws translate back into policies in terms of like access, storage, or even like maintaining the ownership and like reporting, etc. as well. So what we do is kind of a translation from that to kind of the policies, like what it means for each system, depends upon whether it is your data warehouse or your BI reports or your models, etc. as well. And like we implement, like we kind of like abstract it out for the end user, like which is the organization itself, and implement it. So at the end, you need to make sure it is translated and enforced. And most importantly, you can audit and like report it back to make sure that this is enforced as well.
So the attraction of the automated model governance is it's automated, right? So, so in your model, so is if people aren't contributing knowledge to the governance model, so how tunable is that? How much automation can I apply?
Yeah, another great question. So what we strongly believe is, yes, we need to leverage automation as much as possible, but also make sure you have those human levers like where you can plug in and like control. And there is no one single rule for even within an organization for the entire system, right? So we kind of like let you almost customize your controls depending upon the criticality of your data systems as well. Like for example, anything that is related to finance is more restrictive rather than things which are in like R&D in terms of like building things and stuff like that. Like you have those flexibilities built into it.
On the data discovery side, how much do you depend on user contributions?
Not much. I think while we believe that the knowledge actually comes from like the people, conversations and things that is very much required, there is a lot of things which you can leverage out of the box, like a 60% out of it, like to get started, like which is the cold start problem, right? Like you bring value to the table before you start like interesting people to kind of like engage back. Like for example, people are querying tables, people are having Slack conversations and things. We tap into all of those things automatically, historically, to bring some relevant information and insights directly before we expect people to kind of build it. It's not, it is a 60 to 40% kind of differentiation.
I had just two questions. So my first question was regarding how much time in comparison to the automated process does it take for you to like in terms of starting with the client engagement till the end point. And the other question was regarding the architecture, because a lot of companies already have the mature architecture in place. So how do you deal with that and the cultural issues towards data as well?
Yes, excellent point. So while the promise of automated AI solutions sounds like a zero maintenance or a fully automated like things, the cost of integration is very high for something like that to kind of like work, to start working. And what we have noticed in practice is that every single time there has to be some domain-based decision. You break from the automation, you make an exception, and like you don't. It essentially breaks the whole point of what being an automated system, which is practically the situation, right? You cannot run it in a practical thing. So what we did was, that's why that 60-40% kind of thing, like we do automation as much as possible, but like we also bring that human levers and things. How we operate with, we don't, not being fully AI driven, doesn't require us as much of like control over the legacy systems with, so we write like very lightweight metadata integrations with these systems, and like we operate on top of that. It doesn't require, we can operate like with very modern system like Snowflake kind of system, or Databricks kind of system, or we can also operate with like very Oracle DB2 or mainframes kind of systems at the same level. Yeah.
So you mentioned Snowflake a lot. You should mention Databricks.
Databricks.
But unstructured data. So in this conference, a lot of people work in computer vision, for example. So how much of these techniques actually map to unstructured data?
I think we definitely have a lot more challenges with unstructured data, but good thing is a lot of systems are still exposing decent amount of metadata while handling the unstructured data as well. And even for us, like we get into try to profile the data and things like using the advancements in the libraries for unstructured data as well. While I agree that like we don't have as much support for unstructured compared to the structured in general, but like that's continuously in progress. Like, and we're making decent outcome. Yeah, model works, mental model works.
All right, so case studies. So, my question, or this case, comes from the angle of so-called trustworthy AI, especially auditable AI, right? So let's say you have a car. Let's say, we have to pick on either Uber or Tesla. So let's just pick on them both. Let's say a car driven by the self-driving algorithm by Uber or Tesla hits someone or hits something serious enough that there is an investigation, right? And let's say I am the NTSB investigator. The case lands on my desk. What I would like to get access to is the data at the time or around the time of the incident, right? What does the camera see? What does the LiDAR feel or sense? What are the controls of the car around that time? What's the weather outside? So that's the first set of data that I want to know. I also want to know what data has gone into the training of the models. So can you talk through what would be needed to achieve that level of auditability?
Got it. Good point. Like if you think about how it is practically implemented, right? Like all the sensor informations, all this information getting stored into one place, it's never directly plugged into like hey, this is the end decision making kind of a thing. There are multiple layers of like dependencies of how this data has transformed and like eventually made to the point of decision of like that particular decision, why they applied the brake or not, or why they hit, right? So what a data governance solutions like kind of give you the capabilities to kind of like go back all the way. It is not just about your end products, it is about your entire data structure, like entire data stack, how the data originated, how it behaved at every single place, and also most importantly, how it has was modified all through this time frame as well, across all these systems to kind of arrive at that decision. It is a lot more about, hey, can you give auditability into each of these systems while to make that, to debug that situation or understand that situation better.
And how much do you feel will be the overhead for developers, right? So I mean, developers like myself today, we don't have to care about anything. We just get any data that we can get access to, build a model, and ship to our bosses, and they say, "Oh, it's good because I have this and that degree." But well, who knows, right? So in the future, if the company is ultimately answerable to stakeholders like the public or the users or regulators, then I myself as a developer have to change my ways of doing things. So how much of a extra effort will that be?
Got it. I think there is a distributed ownership or responsibility of both the developer as well as the actual data, the systems what you use as well, right? Because a developer shouldn't be worried too much about how I should build this repeatability or like explainability like every single time. They have some shared responsibility, but the systems or platforms what the companies are investing into also should have these capabilities. That's what is happening in all the data infrastructure companies these days. Like everyone is trying to help developers to kind of make their life easy towards these causes. But it's definitely shared responsibility from both sides.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so thank you, Pardhu, for all the insights.